Welcome to my Thanksgiving special. I cannot believe that we are here. It is Thanksgiving season, turkey time, and we are filming in my brand new kitchen. I cannot believe this. This is amazing. And for my Thanksgiving special, I'm going to take you through an entire process of making a Thanksgiving meal, from appetizers to desserts and everything in between. And for this year's Thanksgiving theme, I decided to go with a local harvest theme, and I'm going to be using as much ingredients from Vancouver Island, which is where I live, as possible. But if you're not on Vancouver Island and you can't get these exact ingredients, don't worry about it. You can just use whatever is locally available to you. So we are doing big preparation day today. Is the day before our Thanksgiving meal, and we have lots of stuff to get done. And I feel like the more things you get done the day before Thanksgiving, the less stress it actually is on Thanksgiving Day. So we want to prepare as much as we can today. But first, before we get into preparing, let me tell you the menu. For our appetizers, we'll be making some apple cider glazed meatballs along with dried apricots with fromage frais, walnuts, and honey. For our main dish, we'll be serving a brown butter and sage turkey along with sourdough bread stuffing, creamy mashed potatoes, easy shaved Brussels sprouts with bacon, and roasted squash trio with orange honey butter as sides. And we'll finish off this meal with my home-style apple pie for dessert. So if you're ready, let's get cooking. All right, now we're on to making our apple pie, and I think apple pie is perfect for Thanksgiving. Everybody loves apple pie, so it is definitely a must make for our household. So I've been peeling some apples. I've peeled almost 3 pounds of Honeycrisp apples. Honeycrisp is my favorite apple to use in any sort of apple pie, even to eat during the fall. It is just the best apple in my opinion, so we're using some local Honeycrisp apples in this recipe. So I've been working on peeling them and chopping them into little slices like this, and I just have a couple more to do. So let me finish peeling up all the apples, and in the meantime I'll show you how I made my home-style pie dough for our apple pie. To make my home-style pie dough, we're going to start off with 2 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour into a bowl. Next, we're going to add 6 tablespoons of granulated sugar and half a teaspoon of salt. I'm going to mix all the dry ingredients to combine, and then we're going to add in 1 cup of cold butter. I've cut the butter into large rectangles, and I'm adding that to the bowl. And to mix it through, I'm squishing it so it becomes flat between my fingers, and it creates these nice big chunks of butter. And I like doing it this way because you get larger chunks of butter in your pie dough, and it makes it more flaky. Once the butter is mixed through, I'll add 4 to 6 tablespoons of ice water and a teaspoon of lemon juice to the bowl. And I'll give it another mix so all the dough comes together. Next, I'll dump the pie dough on the counter and knead it just a little bit. And during the kneading process, I'll divide the dough in half and stack it on top of each other a few times just so that it creates more layers in your pie dough, which will make it extra flaky. The dough has come together. Now you're ready to divide it in half into 2 discs, wrap it in saran wrap, and store it in the refrigerator for tomorrow. Now we'll get back to making our apple pie filling. You want the apple slices to be about 1 centimeter thick, and instead of putting this into our pie dough raw, you're actually going to cook it down a bit. And I find this always yields a better apple pie because sometimes apple pies can be a little too watery, and I do not like that. I like when all the filling kind of sticks together, but it's still nice and soft and warm and delicious. So we're going to cook the apple pie filling the day before, and then we'll let it rest in the fridge overnight, and tomorrow we can assemble and bake the pie first thing in the morning. So that is the plan. Now we have all our apples all sliced up. I'm just going to clean up my area, and then we will finish off our pie filling. Okay, now that all of our apples are chopped up, we are going to add some other ingredients. So first up, I'm going to add some lemon juice to the apples just to prevent them from turning brown color and oxidizing. So we have that. I'm going to give it a little quick stir just to get it all over the apples. And that's about 2 tablespoons of lemon juice that I added. Now all the apples are mixed with the lemon juice. We are going to add some dark brown sugar. And this is 1/2 cup plus 2 tablespoons, really densely packed. And brown sugar in apple pie makes the filling taste so good. I really like it a lot better than just regular granulated white sugar. It is so molassesy and delicious, and I love it. So we're gonna just toss that through a little bit. Next, we're gonna add the spices. We have 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon and half a teaspoon of nutmeg. I like to keep the spices in apple pie really simple. I really want just like the apples to really shine. Now we have our apples all mixed up. They are looking really nice and coated. Now we're gonna take them over to the stove with some cornstarch and we're gonna cook these down. So let's go. It's been about 10 minutes and as you can see, the apples have softened and we're getting a nice delicious sauce on the bottom. So what we're gonna do at this point is add in our cornstarch, and all I've done is mix 1 tablespoon of cornstarch with 1 tablespoon of water, and we're gonna pour that over the apples and stir. And what this does is it thickens up the apple pie filling so it's a little bit less runny. And now we're just gonna take it off the heat and we're gonna transfer it into a bowl, and we're gonna cover it, put it in the fridge overnight, and then we'll be ready to make our pie first thing in the morning. Pearl's a turkey, Pearl's a turkey, she's a turkey kitty. Okay, so next up we are gonna make our turkey, and this year I am doing a brown butter sage turkey. It is so good. So the dry brine is probably the easiest brine out of all the brines. Well, there's only 2. There's a dry brine and a wet brine. But wet brines take up a lot of space. So you have to have it in a bucket or some sort of container and you have to keep it cold. But since we don't have that much room, we're gonna do a dry brine and it is gonna make the turkey super moist and juicy. And you know how much we love the word moist on Thanksgiving. This is the Thanksgiving turkey that we have for this year. We got this locally here on Vancouver Island, and it is about 6.5 kilograms, which is about 12 to 13 pounds. So it's a big bird. So for our dry brine, it is super simple. It's basically a mixture of salt and sugar with some herbs and spices if you want. So in this bowl, I have about 1.5 tablespoons of white sugar, and I'm gonna add the same amount of salt. And next we're gonna add some pepper. So I am using fresh ground pepper, and this pepper mill takes forever. So I'm gonna try to aim for about 1 tablespoon as well. All right, so now we have 1 tablespoon of the black pepper in there now. And next up I'm gonna add some herbs, and this is totally optional for a dry brine, but I think it adds a little bit more flavor to the turkey, which is what we want. So I have here about 1 teaspoon of fresh thyme and fresh sage that I minced up. And I'm just gonna add it in, and we're just gonna mix that up together in the bowl. Once we have our dry brine done, it'll look something like this, and basically we're just gonna put this all over the turkey. So now, dry brine, we're just gonna sprinkle all over our turkey. I'm gonna start with the breast part. Just get a bunch of salt on there. Also gonna do the legs and the wings. And I'm keeping the turkey in our roasting pan. You can do this in a separate pan than the pan that you're gonna use to roast it, but this is just more convenient for me. So we're gonna rub the turkey brine in, and we're gonna get everywhere. Every crevice is gonna get some of this brine mixture. And we're also gonna put the brine all in the back. Okay, that is perfect. We're gonna flip the turkey back over if we can even lift it. Now that we have our dry brine rubbed all over the turkey, we are gonna put it in the fridge just like this, open, exposed to the air in the fridge, and it's gonna sit there for about a day. And what's gonna happen is that all the salt and sugar is gonna kind of penetrate into the turkey, and it'll also release some water too. So this isn't all gonna be like sitting inside the turkey. It's not gonna be very salty or sweet. You'll just lightly flavor the turkey meat, which is perfect. And there'll also be some liquid that comes out into the bottom of the pan, which is also why I have it sitting on this beautiful metal rack. So all the liquid can drain away from the bird and it's not sitting in juices and blood and anything else that comes out into it. So I'm gonna wash my hands and I'm gonna pop this in the fridge just like this, and then we will see it tomorrow right before we need to cook it. All right, stuffing. Now, we're gonna prepare the bread for the stuffing the day before because it has to dry out. So this year for my bread, I am using an amazing sourdough loaf. This is from a local bakery called Working Culture Bread, and this one is, I think, perfect for stuffing. This is the lunch pail. So pretty standard sourdough, really, really nice. So of course you can use your favorite bread in this recipe. If you have a sourdough, that works great. But also if you just have like a plain white loaf that you really like, use that too. So we are basically gonna tear up this loaf. I think I'm gonna need my knife to kind of get in and start the tearing process. So We're gonna cut in, and we're just gonna basically rip this loaf apart, and we are gonna put it into the baking dish that's gonna bake in tomorrow. So we're just gonna tear off pieces about that big. You want them a little bit bigger so that when we add all of the wonderful ingredients tomorrow, like the carrots and the celery and onion and chicken broth, everything kind of has something to adhere to, and it's not just like turning into mush. You want really big chunks. And this is a pretty easy task to do the day before Thanksgiving. Really fun too. You can get like kids to do this as well. I think that would be super fun. All right, now all of our sourdough bread is all ripped up, ready to go. We're just gonna leave it in the oven overnight, obviously off, and we're gonna do this so it just dries out, make sure no dust or dirt or cat hair really gets into the stuffing. And by tomorrow, these should be really crispy, really dried out, and be great for starting some stuffing. So another thing we can do before Thanksgiving is to actually cook our squash for our roasted squash trio with orange honey butter. So I actually like to cook my squash the day before Thanksgiving because it does take a while to cook. It's at least an hour, and you don't want to have to do that on Thanksgiving because it's just going to be a lot going on in the oven. So I like to cook it the day before, and it reheats really, really nice. So what I have here is some butternut squash. That is the first squash in our roasted squash trio, and I think that's just a staple squash to have during the fall, so it had to go into this recipe. So I basically peeled it and sliced it up, and we roasted it. Then I also have two other squashes. I have an acorn squash here that I did the exact same thing to, and some kabocha squash. All I did to roast them was just toss them in some salt and pepper and olive oil, put them in a sheet pan and roast them for about an hour, and they are perfect. So at this point, now that our squash is cooked, I'm gonna transfer it to a baking dish. So all that's gonna go in there. All our squash is placed in our baking dish, and I kind of mix it up so that we get an even distribution of the different types of squash throughout the baking dish. Now, if you just want to serve the squash just roasted, you can cover this, put it in the fridge, and then reheat it tomorrow. But for me, and because it's Thanksgiving, we are going to make it a little bit fancy by making an orange honey butter. So I have about 1/3 cup of butter in here, and I just softened it in the microwave for about 10 seconds so it's easily spreadable. And now we're going to add some honey to it. And of course, I'm using local honey. This is from Babe's Honey Farm, and it's their wildflower honey. This is my favorite honey because it's so delicious. The flavor is perfect, and I think it goes with everything. So this is a staple in my kitchen. We're just gonna add honey to butter. It's super simple. And I like to do a big dollop of honey in there. And the honey really just adds a nice floral accent. It really enhances the sweetness of the squash too, which is perfect. And of course, if you like it a little bit sweeter, you can totally do that, but I find that if you get a local in-season squash, the squash is already sweet itself, so I like to kind of not have it be too sweet. So about a tablespoon of honey works for me. So that's all in. Now I'm gonna add about a tablespoon of orange zest that I've just zest off camera here. So that's all gonna go in, and we're just gonna mix it up to combine. Oh, look at how beautiful that is. Oh my goodness. Okay, when it's all mixed up, it'll look like this. Super beautiful, very autumnal as well, which I think is perfect for this roasted squash trio. So I'm just dolloping this orange honey butter all over the squash, and then tomorrow, after the turkey comes out, we're gonna bake this in the oven just like this for about 15 to 20 minutes, just so that it heats through again and all the butter melts over the squash. And again, we could just stop there with adding the orange honey butter, but I'm gonna add a little bit more texture to the squash just because squash can be pretty soft, pretty one texture. So we're gonna add a little bit of crunch and a little bit more sweetness and freshness to this dish. So to do that, I'm gonna add some pepitas, some dried cranberries, and some parsley together and mix it up so it's kind of like a gremolata. So it'll add a nice freshness and texture on top of this beautiful roasted squash with orange honey butter. So I'm gonna finally chop the pepitas as well as the parsley, and then we're gonna mix everything together in our bowl. And our parsley is all chopped up, so I'm just gonna add that in with the pepitas. Then we're gonna add our whole dried cranberries. I don't chop these up because since they're dried, they are kind of a pain to chop up, so I just add them in whole. And then with clean hands, we're just gonna toss everything together and Look at how festive that topping is. That is so beautiful. So after we heat our squash tomorrow, we're just gonna take it out of the oven, let it cool for about 5 minutes, and then add this beautiful gremolata topping on top of it, and it is gonna make the squash look even more festive than it does right now. And then to serve this, I'm just gonna put a little beeswax wrap on top of this, pop it in the fridge, and it'll be ready to go for tomorrow. So another task we can do the day before Thanksgiving is make our sauce for our apple cider glazed meatballs. Now, here in a bowl, I have some apple jelly. You can also use apricot jelly if you can't find apple jelly. I know sometimes that can be hard to find, so apricot is a very good substitute. And to that, I'm gonna add some apple cider. Just whatever your local apple cider you can find, that is probably the best to use in this recipe. And with your apple cider, just make sure that there's no extra sugars added. Just make sure it's pure apple cider because that is what you want for this recipe. Once we have it in the bowl, I'm just gonna give it a little quick whisk. Once that's whisked together, we can also add some maple syrup. And here I have about 2 tablespoons, and that's gonna give it some nice extra sweetness and a little bit of seasonal maple flavor, which I think is super nice in these meatballs. So as you can see, it is a very liquidy sauce right now. And if you put this directly into the crock pot with the meatballs, it's not gonna cook down, it's not gonna fully coat the meatballs and glaze them the way we want them to. So to ensure that we have a really nice glaze for our meatballs, I'm actually gonna cook this glaze down. I'm gonna reduce it by half, and then that'll make sure that this gets nice and thick and amazing, and it'll cover the meatballs perfectly. And to cook it down, I'm just gonna do it over the stove. It's super easy. So I'm just gonna transfer this to a little pot. And we're also gonna add some spices to it to give it some more autumn flavors. So I have 1 cinnamon stick here, which is gonna go into the pot. I also have a very small piece of star anise here. I don't wanna put in a whole clove because it makes it a little bit too licoricey, especially as it cooks in the sauce and with the meatballs. So we're gonna do a little small piece. And we're also gonna do some ground nutmeg. So that's all gonna go into the pot here. Now we're gonna take this over to the stove, cook it down so it reduces by half. Then I'm gonna store it in a container overnight. Then about 2 hours before our guests arrive tomorrow, I'm gonna take out the sauce, pour it all over our meatballs, and then set the crock pot to cook for 2 hours. And for the meatballs, you can actually make your own meatballs, or a great shortcut on Thanksgiving is to actually use frozen meatballs. And I like beef and pork meatballs, so like a Swedish meatball, just because it's a little bit more neutral in flavor as opposed to things like frozen Italian meatballs that might have some more different spices in it. But Swedish meatballs are the way to go. Store-bought, homemade, either way totally works. But that is the plan. So I'm gonna put this on the stove and we're gonna cook this down. So the last full recipe we're gonna make the day before Thanksgiving is our appetizer for dried apricots, fromage frais, walnuts, and honey. And this is a super simple appetizer. It just requires assembly of some key ingredients, which I've named half of them already, but it is really easy, but I like to get it out of the way the day before Thanksgiving because the assembly can be a little bit tedious. And with simple recipes, I like to use really high quality ingredients, and I'm using a locally made fromage frais from Little Qualicum Cheeseworks. This cheese is so good. It's very similar to cream cheese. It's just a little bit tangier and it is just so delicious. So if you can't find fromage frais where you are, you can substitute it with regular cream cheese, or you can do a nice mild goat cheese. That will work really well in this recipe too. And like I said, this is a super simple appetizer to assemble. And all we're gonna do is take 1 dried apricot. I'm gonna take a little bit of the fromage frais and spread it on top. So cute. Then I'm going to top it with some toasted walnut. Just 1 is perfect. And then a little sprig of rosemary on top just for garnish. So look at how gorgeous that looks. That is so beautiful. So all I'm going to do is continue to assemble these and arrange them on my platter. And then I'm going to cover them, place them in the refrigerator overnight. And then right before your guests arrive, just take this out, place it on the counter, and then drizzle it with some honey. And you will have the perfect appetizer to kick off your Thanksgiving meal. The final thing we'll do the day before Thanksgiving is chop up our ingredients that we'll use for cooking tomorrow. And I'll begin by preparing some ingredients for our sourdough bread stuffing. So I'll chop up 3 stalks of celery into fine pieces. I'll also do the same thing with 2 carrots and a whole onion, making sure that all the ingredients are approximately the same size. And then I'll place these all in a container together, cover it, and store it in the refrigerator for tomorrow. I'll also chop up our Brussels sprouts for tomorrow, and to prepare these, I simply just give them a wash, remove any outer leaves that might be damaged, trim the end of the Brussels sprout, and finally cut these into thin strips. And then this will be all ready to go for when we make our easy shaved Brussels sprouts with bacon recipe tomorrow. I'm also going to peel a dozen shallots, and we're going to use this when we're making our brown butter and sage turkey. These will go at the bottom of the roasting pan so that they can absorb all of the delicious turkey juice. And speaking of turkey, we'll also prepare the brown butter that'll go all on the inside and the outside of our bird tomorrow. Making brown butter is super easy. All you do is heat some butter over medium-high heat. The melted butter will begin to foam, and then the foam will subside. And at this point, I like to swirl the pan and watch for it to turn the perfect shade of medium brown and smell deliciously nutty. At the very end of the cooking process, I'll add 8 sage leaves to the brown butter, give it a swirl, and then remove it from the heat and let it cool before storing in a container overnight. And now that our ingredients are all prepped, make sure you get a good night's rest so that we can cook on Thanksgiving tomorrow. All right, so we are back. It is Thanksgiving Day. Turkey Day is here and everyone is coming over tonight. So we are gonna get preparing some food, and we're gonna begin by wrapping up our apple pie. Basically gonna be assembling it and baking it in the oven. That we are doing first thing in the morning, just so we can get that out of the way and get room in the oven for our turkey to go in. Before we do that, I wanna show you these beautiful flowers that I picked from my garden last night. I'm gonna be making some arrangements with these, but look at this color palette. I'm dying. If you want to learn how to grow these, follow my gardening videos. There'll be a link in the annotation above. So we're going to get to rolling out our dough, and I have had this out for about 20 minutes just to come up a little bit more to room temperature and soften it up. And then we're going to sprinkle, I have a little silicone mat here. You can just do this on the counter as well. I'm just going to sprinkle it with some flour, pop that down. I'm going to sprinkle the top with flour and my rolling pin. Start by making the bottom crust. I'm going to start rolling this out. I'm already tired. It's a workout. Whenever you make your pie dough, you always want to make sure that you keep the dough moving on your work surface just so that it doesn't get stuck. Because it really sucks when you roll out all the dough and then it gets stuck to your counter or your board. So annoying. So we're going to pick this up and place it into our pie dish, and the easiest way to do that is just to roll it up on your rolling pin. So take that, roll it up, bring your pie plate over to you, makes life a lot easier, and then just drape your pie crust and roll it out. And all you do is just push the pie crust into your dish. You don't want to pull it or stretch it at this point, because when it bakes it's going to shrink and you don't want that for your pie. So next we're going to roll out the top layer of our pie crust. We're going to aim for about the same thickness, but we're going to do a little bit of a decoration using some fun little cookie cutters that I have. I have an apple and an oak leaf, and I'm going to show you the design that we're going to do. It's going to be super cute and really make the apple pie look super fancy and festive for Thanksgiving. Now we have our top crust all rolled out, and before we actually put it on the pie, I'm actually going to do the cookie cutters now. And this is super helpful because once you put the crust on top of the pie and the pie filling, it's really hard to actually get a nice design, especially with cookie cutters, because you don't have a flat surface to work on, so it's got a little bit difficult. It comes out a little bit wonky. But what I'm going to do is take my little apple cookie cutter, and I'm just going to put right in the middle, and then I'm going to press it down and take out the apple. Some more around it, not too far away, just maybe about an inch or so away from the center vent hole. And when baking apple pie, the vent holes, or basically any pie actually, anything with a fruit filling, it's really important to have the vent holes to allow the steam from the pie filling to escape. If not, all of it gets trapped and you get a really soggy crust, which nobody likes. So these are very important, and if you can make them decorative and pretty, I think that's also super nice to do. So these are the apples that we made yesterday, and it is still a little bit liquidy, so what I'm going to do is try and strain the apples as much as possible, just so that we don't have this extra liquid. We use our hot pot spoon. It has little holes in it, so the excess juice will kind of drain away from the apples before I put it into the pie. We are going to put on the lid. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to roll it up on the rolling pin and then roll it back over. Ta-da! So we're gonna take the paring knife and go around the outside. And to seal the pie, I'm just gonna tuck the edges under pie, and this will make sure everything stays sealed, and we're gonna get a nice little crimp on the edge, which is gonna be really, really pretty. Ta-da! Look at how cute that is. I'm gonna take the excess pieces of dough and just re-roll them up. Now we have our excess pie dough rolled out, and I'm gonna take my little oak leaf cookie cutter and just cut out a bunch of little oak leaves. Instead of brushing each individual leaf when you put it on the pie, dip your pastry brush in a little bit of egg wash and then you paint them all together. So much easier than doing them individually. So before we put our leaves on, we're just gonna brush the entire pie with some egg wash, and that'll help the decoration to stick. It's gonna give the pie a nice brown crust. Now we're just gonna take our little oak leaves and decorate it around the pie. And I might have to do a few more, but I think that's okay. I think I'll have enough. Just roll out the dough again. Even with the egg wash on it, it's totally fine. You arrange your leaves however you want to do it. You can be super creative with this process. It's really fun. And look at how pretty, how autumnal, how gorgeous that looks. Oh my gosh, so beautiful. Then to add a little bit of extra sheen, I'm going to sprinkle the top with some granulated white sugar. You can also use turbinado sugar here too to get a little bit bigger chunks of sugar on top, but I like the fineness of just regular granulated white sugar. Next, we're going to bake our apple pie. I'm actually going to put it on a baking sheet, and then we're going to bake it in the oven just like this on the baking pan. And the pan also will help the bottom of the pie to really stay nice and crisp and delicious. So, little trick, you don't mess up your oven and you get a nice crisp bottom crust. So this is going to go into the oven at 350 degrees for about 45 minutes to 50 minutes. You want to check that the edges aren't getting too golden brown. If that happens, just make a little ring out of tin foil, put that on the edges and keep baking the pie, but it should all be nice and bubbly and nice and golden brown when it's done. So let's pop this in the oven and get it baking. And after about an hour, your pie should come out looking all beautiful and golden brown just like this. I'll let this pie cool at room temperature, and after we sit down to eat, I'll actually pop the pie back in the oven and keep it on the warm setting just so that the pie warms through and is ready to serve for dessert. So our apple pie is done, and it is time to start cooking the turkey. Now at this point, you're probably looking at this and you're probably freaking out, but don't freak out. It's gonna be okay. I was thinking to myself, why did I do this? But it is definitely gonna be worth it. And always remember, if you can cook a roast chicken, you can cook a roast turkey. So to make this brown butter and sage roast turkey, we are gonna actually stuff the brown butter under the skin. So we need to actually separate the skin from the meat. Super easy to do. All you need is clean hands, and I also have a spoon here because the turkey is very big. So you take your clean hands and go under the skin and just start loosening it. And this might be a little bit difficult at first because the dry brine kind of makes the skin really contract up against the meat. But once you start working your fingers in there, it is easy to kind of separate. You want to be super careful. You want to go really slow. If you have short nails, that's helpful. My nails are not that short, so I have to be super careful I don't rip the skin. If you rip it, it's totally fine. It's not the end of the world, but you're not going to have that like Instagram perfect turkey at the end, but go slowly and you'll be fine. And I can't reach my fingers all the way up here, so I'm going to take the back of a spoon. I'm just going to slide it in. I'm going to just start wiggling the spoon around, and you'll see the skin will begin separating from the meat. So we're going to separate the skin on the turkey breast area as well as the legs. Basically the same thing, you just want to feel around, get in there as far as you can with your fingers without ripping anything, and then again take the back of the spoon and kind of just push and wiggle. All right, so now all of the skin has been loosened from the turkey meat. We are going to stuff it with the brown butter. And last night I made the brown butter, which you saw in my little montage earlier, and this is what it looks like when it comes out of the fridge. It has all solidified and the little crispy bits are on the bottom. So we want to, I'm just going to use my hands to do this. We want to kind of mix it up, and it's going to kind of feel a little bit weird, but just get in there and kind of mix up the butter. So I also left the sage leaves in there overnight so that they really infuse into the butter and give it all that amazing sage flavor. And at this point, the sage leaves are pretty crispy and they're really good for stuffing under the skin. So we're just gonna mix up this butter and then we're gonna start putting it into the turkey. We're gonna take a couple tablespoons of brown butter, lift up the turkey skin, and then just push that through. Keep repeating the process, stuffing the brown butter all the way into the turkey breast and on the legs, and it's gonna be so good. It's gonna be such a nice buttery turkey. It's gonna keep it nice and juicy and delicious. Everyone is gonna love this. Okay, so you're gonna take what's left of your butter and just rub it basically all over the turkey. I don't typically do the bottom just because when the juices kind of drip off, it'll drip off and under since it's on a rack. So I don't really bother with flipping the turkey around and doing the bottom, but I will make sure to get the tops, the wings, all coated in brown butter. It seems like there's a lot of butter on this turkey, and there kind of is, but it is a big turkey and it is the holidays. So I'm just gonna go all out and put brown butter all over this turkey. Okay, now that our turkey is all covered in brown butter, we are gonna stuff it with a few things just to add a bit more flavor to it as it cooks. So we're gonna add a whole onion, and what I'm gonna do is just cut it in half and maybe into quarters as well, just like this. I'm gonna pop a couple pieces into the cavity. And then in the middle, we are gonna put a garlic. So I'm gonna take a whole head of garlic, slice it in half, and then it'll expose all of the beautiful cloves. So we're just gonna put one of those in. Then we're gonna do some herbs. I'm gonna do more sage. A little bundle of sage goes in, push that through. I'm also gonna add some parsley. This will add some really nice freshness. When you're stuffing the cavity of the turkey, you wanna make sure you only fill it about 3/4 of the way full, and this will allow the air from the oven to get in, get nice and hot and steamy, and then cook the bird properly. If you pack it totally full, it takes longer for the hot air from the oven to go through all those ingredients and then cook your turkey from the inside. So 3/4 of the way full is the perfect amount of stuff to go into the cavity. I almost forgot my bay leaves. I have 2 fresh bay leaves from the garden. I'm just gonna kind of nestle these along the top here. Push that right, oh, I don't like that. For trussing the bird, I'm just gonna take a little bit of baker's string. This is 100% cotton string, and I'm just gonna tie the little legs together so that they're not flopping all over the pan as it cooks. So I'm just gonna tie these up. And that is good. I'm not gonna tuck the wings in because I like the crispy bits on the end. And yeah, we're just gonna leave these kind of flailing around, but it should be really, really good. Okay, and before we put the turkey in the oven, we are gonna add some shallots to the bottom of the pan. You can use regular onions, but I like to use shallots because when they cook, they get nice and jammy and delicious. So I'm gonna put the shallots all over the bottom of the pan. Get in there. There we go. Okay, so the shallots are in, and the final touch is to add a little bit of olive oil on the top. I know we put butter all over this, but olive oil helps prevent the butter from burning, so we're gonna drizzle the turkey with olive oil. It has this beautiful olive oil sheen. Wish I had a nice olive oil sheen. Now for the cooking temperatures. This is probably the most important part of cooking the turkey because you want to make sure it's actually cooked and that you don't poison your guests with raw meat. That's not going to be a good Thanksgiving. With my oven, I actually have an oven probe, which is super handy, and I'm going to show you how to insert it. If you don't have one of these, you can definitely just use one of those pen thermometers. I actually have one. This is my trusty one from Amazon, and I will still use this because I don't fully trust the oven probe. Either way, with any thermometer, you want to be sure to insert it into the thickest part of the turkey breast. So the thickest part of the turkey breast is where, if you look at it, the breast comes to a little bit of a peak, and then you want to go down about 1 inch. So you want to kind of measure that out with your thermometer, mark it with your thumb, and then insert it into the turkey to about that depth. So all I'm gonna do is plug the probe into the oven, and I'm gonna set it to 165 to being done. So the turkey is actually fully cooked when the breast is 170 degrees Fahrenheit. So if I pull it out at 165 Fahrenheit and let it rest, it'll come up in temperature an extra 5 degrees, and then when the turkey is done, it'll just be the perfect temperature, and the breast will be nice and juicy, and the legs will be fully cooked and tender and amazing. So that is the plan. So let's get this over to the stove and get the turkey baking, and then I'll show you how to baste the turkey partway through the cooking process. Turkey is going in. Oh my god, just fits. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. So once your turkey gets in the oven, after double checking that it fits, you want to bake it for about 2 hours, and then after the 2-hour mark, take your baster and baste the turkey every 30 minutes or so, and as you can see, it'll get a nice golden brown sheen just like this. And then you want to keep basting your turkey every 30 minutes until it's done when it reads 165 degrees Fahrenheit on a thermometer. Then simply remove it from the oven, cover it, and then as it rests, it'll come up to 170 degrees Fahrenheit, and then it will be completely cooked and ready for serving. Okay, so putting the turkey in the oven was a little bit traumatic, so make sure before you start your oven that your turkey actually fits, or else you're gonna be freaking out like I was. But it's all good, she's in there, she's cooking, it's amazing. So now we're gonna go on to make our stuffing. Now I have our sourdough bread. This has all been dried out. I have it separated into one layer in our baking dish, just like this. And I have extras in here. And I have that because we're gonna cook the vegetable filling and layer it. Instead of having to toss everything together, this is much easier. We're gonna cook our vegetable filling. So first off, I'm gonna heat my pan over medium-high heat, and I'm gonna add some butter to it. We're gonna let that start to melt, and we're also gonna add some olive oil. This will help prevent the butter from burning. Now that our butter is all melted, we're gonna add in our vegetables that we chopped up yesterday. So there's 1 onion in here, 2 carrots, and 3 stalks of celery. So this is gonna go right in, and we're gonna cook this up. Okay, and we're just gonna toss all of the vegetables in butter, and we're gonna start to let those soften up. We don't want them to get like really dark golden brown. If it gets a light golden brown, it's okay, but we just want these to really soften and release a lot of the water. To help that process along, I'm gonna add some salt, about a teaspoon of sea salt, just like that. And a bunch of ground black pepper, of course. Perfect. Now we're gonna mix that in. Oh, this smells so good. And we're gonna let those go. So after about 10 minutes, all your vegetables should be nice and softened and beautiful. And at this point, we're gonna reduce the heat to low, and then we're gonna add in some herbs. And herbs, I think, adds such great flavor and freshness to this recipe. So I have a mix of sage, fresh thyme, and parsley. So we're gonna sprinkle that in, and then we're gonna toss that all to combine. Turn that off, and then what I'm gonna do now is actually scoop half of the vegetable mixture and put it on top of our dried out sourdough bread. That's perfect. So half of the vegetable mixture is on top of the dried sourdough, and then we're just gonna top it with the rest of the sourdough. And this top layer, I like to kind of arrange and make it look kind of pretty, but you can just dump it on, it's totally fine. There's our layer of bread, and then we're gonna add the rest of the vegetables on top. All right, and now once you've added all of the vegetables on top, I'm just gonna gently press this down into one layer, and then I'm gonna pour over some chicken stock on top. And I've had this just heating up here. It's about 2 cups of chicken stock. I made some homemade stuff, so feel free to use homemade or store-bought. So we're gonna pour the chicken broth all over top. Try not to spill any on the counter. So once you add your chicken broth, the bread is gonna start soaking it up. And when you separate the bread, you should see a little tiny pool of chicken stock on the bottom, which is perfect. You don't wanna have like a lot of chicken stock in there. So we are gonna pop this in the oven. I'm gonna cover it with aluminum foil, bake it in the oven 350 for about an hour. And then if you like a crispy top, after an hour, just take the aluminum foil off and keep baking it for about 15 minutes, and the top will get nice and crisp and golden and amazing. All right, now it's ready to go into the oven. All right, next up we are making my Brussels sprouts with bacon, and this is a tried and true recipe for Thanksgiving. I've made this tons of times and it is always a hit. So what I'm doing now is I'm frying off some bacon, and I have 4 slices that I just cut in half to fit in the pan a bit easier. And this is locally made. This is from Red Barn Market, and I think they have the best bacon in Victoria. So I had to put it in this recipe. Now that the bacon's all cooked, I'm just gonna remove it from the pan and just set it aside for it to cool down a little bit. Because while the pan is still hot and with all that bacon fat in there, we're gonna add half of an onion in there. Onion's gonna add some delicious fall flavors, and it's gonna pick up all the amazing brown bits on the bottom of the pan. So we have about 8 cups of Brussels sprouts here, and it seems like a lot, but it is gonna reduce down quite a bit. So you always wanna have a little bit more than you think you need, kind of like spinach. We're gonna pour these in, give this a little toss, just get all the Brussels sprouts going in here. And it's gonna release some water, and it's gonna pull up all those brown bits from the bottom of the pan. Look at that. They've cooked down so much. They're looking so good. Whoa, I'm flinging them all over the kitchen. These are basically done. They are nice and soft. They're bright green. They're not losing their green color. So at this point, we're gonna add some seasonings. So first thing we're gonna add is apple cider vinegar. Of course, we have to have apple cider vinegar for Thanksgiving. So we're gonna add about half a cup, and we're gonna add some maple syrup. I'm gonna aim for about 1/4 cup to start, and then we will go from there and taste, because I don't want them to be too sweet. I don't like when Brussels sprouts are sweet, but I really like to have that sweet and tart flavor. So I wanna make sure it comes through. So we're just gonna give this a quick toss, and oh, immediately you can smell the apple cider vinegar, and it smells so good. Now we're gonna add our bacon. So I'm gonna go slice this up, and then I'll be right back. All right, our bacon's all chopped up. Now we're just gonna add it into the Brussels sprouts, and we're gonna give everything a final mix through. Okay, so these Brussels sprouts are ready to serve. All I'm gonna do is keep them in this pan, put a lid on it, and just put it on a little trivet on my counter, and it'll stay nice and warm and ready to go for when we're ready to eat dinner. Okay, and arguably it is time for everyone's favorite dish, the mashed potatoes. I always prepare this last because they can't really sit as long as the other dishes, so we are doing this at the very end. But as you can see here, I have cooked up a bunch of potatoes. I do half russets and half Yukon Golds, and the combination of it I think makes the best mashed potatoes ever. And you can use a traditional potato masher to mash up your potatoes. For Thanksgiving, I like to whip out the potato ricer to get that nice, delicious, fine consistency to your mashed potatoes. So I'm going to show you how to use it. So with the potato ricer, all you have to do is lift it out, and you can see there's a little mesh insert in there. And then all you do is take a couple scoops of potatoes, whatever fits into the ricer, and you have to push that in, and then you just squeeze. It comes super fine and light, and it's honestly the best. We have our whole pot of riced potatoes. We have some friends over, so this is actually like literally the perfect timing. So I'm gonna pour, I have some heavy cream in here with some butter, and then I also infused it with some bay leaves and some cloves of garlic. And doing that additional step just makes the potatoes so flavorful and delicious. And as you can see already, how creamy and gorgeous these potatoes are. And I like to use heavy cream in my potatoes because it is the holidays, it is very festive, and as you can see, it makes a lot. That was actually like the best timing, like ever, for people to arrive. And once your guests arrive, you can pull out your appetizers and have a few cocktails before dinner. Then slice up your turkey and serve up all of those side dishes. Then all you have to do is sit back, relax, and enjoy your amazing Thanksgiving meal. And thank you so much for watching my Thanksgiving special. I hope that you enjoyed this Thanksgiving menu that I've planned out, and for all the full recipes and directions, you can find them on my blog, which is linked in the description box below. Thanks so much for watching, and happy Thanksgiving.